Please, I need your warmth tonight. The Apache girls plead to the lonely rancher. The sun was slowly sinking behind the distant hills, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. John Miller stood at the edge of his ranch, watching the last light fade from the horizon. The wind whispered across the dry grass, carrying with it the faint scent of sage and dust. The ranch had always been his world, his home, and his prison all at once. It stretched for miles, a quiet place of freedom, yet also a place of deep loneliness. He had built this life with his own hands, carving order out of the wild land, but every evening the silence reminded him of what he had lost. John had not always been alone. Years ago, his life had been full of laughter and warmth. He remembered mornings filled with the smell of fresh bread baking in the kitchen, the chatter of children running across the yard, and the gentle hum of his wife singing while tending the garden. But that life had ended in a moment of tragedy, a fire that had taken his wife and 2 children. He had escaped with his life, but his heart had been left behind in the flames. Banned. Since then, John had buried himself in work, keeping busy with the ranch, tending the animals and repairing fences, trying to drown the emptiness with routine. Even though he spent his days outdoors, working under the hot sun and riding his horses across the land, the nights were always hardest. The quiet would grow heavier as darkness fell, and he would sit by the small stove in his cabin, staring into the fire, wondering if he would ever feel warmth again. Not just the warmth of a fire, but the warmth of another person caring for him. He had grown used to his solitude, yet sometimes it pressed on him like a weight he could not lift. That evening, as the wind picked up and the temperature dropped, John was checking the fence along the eastern pasture. His boots crunched against the dry soil, and he tugged his coat tight around his broad shoulders. He had noticed recently that the coyotes were moving closer to the ranch, and he wanted to make sure the fence was secure. It was during this routine check that he first saw her, a figure standing at the far edge of the field, barely visible in the dim light. At first he thought it might be some lost traveler or perhaps a stray child from the nearby town. But as he got closer, he saw that she was a young girl, no more than 16. Her clothes were thin and worn, her hair tangled and dusty. She was shivering, hugging herself tightly as if trying to hold in some invisible cold. Her eyes, wide and fearful, met his for a brief moment, and then she looked away, her small body trembling against the chill. John slowed his pace, unsure of what to do. He had seen many travelers in his time, but rarely someone so young and alone. Wandering in the desert as night approached. There was something in her stance, hesitant, fragile, yet determined, that made him pause. He wanted to call out, to ask if she needed help, but the words stuck in his throat. Something told him to be careful. He did not know who she was or where she had come from. The world could be cruel, and not everyone out here had good intentions. Finally, after a long moment, the girl spoke, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Please," she said, and then paused, as if gathering courage. I need your warmth tonight." John felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. He stopped walking, staring at her. The simplicity of her words, the honesty in her plea, struck him in a way he had not felt in years. He could see that she was afraid, and yet there was trust in her voice, a hope that someone would care enough to help her. It was a hope that John recognized, for it mirrored his own longings. A hope that life could still offer connection, even in its darkest moments. He took a cautious step forward. "Are you alone?" he asked gently, trying not to startle her. The girl nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. She did not speak, but the way she looked at him said more than words ever could. John's heart ached. He remembered that feeling, the helplessness of being alone, the fear that no one would be there when you needed him most. He knew he could not turn her away, even if he was uncertain about the consequences. "Come inside," he said finally, his voice soft but firm. He opened the gate to the ranch and gestured for her to follow. Brace. She hesitated for only a moment, then walked toward him, her steps careful and quiet. As they approached the cabin, John noticed how thin and small she was, how vulnerable she seemed against the vastness of the desert. He felt a surge of protective instinct he had not felt in years, an impulse to shelter her from the harsh world outside. Inside the cabin, the warmth of the fire immediately enveloped them. John had already prepared a simple meal: bread, stew, and hot tea. He set a blanket on a chair near the stove and gestured for the girl to sit. She moved slowly, still uncertain, but the promise of warmth and safety seemed to ease her tension slightly. She did not speak at first, only sat with her hands wrapped around her knees, staring into the fire. John watched her for a moment, then went to fetch the food. "Eat," he said simply, placing a bowl in front of her. "It's not much, but it will help." The girl looked at the food with wide eyes, and for the first time a small smile appeared on her face. She took a spoonful and ate slowly, as if savoring not just the taste but the feeling of being cared for. John sat across from her, eating quietly, watching her with a mix of curiosity and concern. He wondered where she had come from, what had driven her to wander alone in the desert, and what kind of life she had known before this moment.
As the night deepened, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows and doors.
The girl, whose name he would later learn was Ayana, began to relax slightly under the steady warmth of the fire. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and let out a small sigh. Base. John could feel the tension in her body slowly melting away, replaced by a fragile sense of trust. For the first time in many years, John felt a sense of connection with another human being. He realized that this encounter, unexpected and strange, was offering him something he had long denied himself: the opportunity to care for someone, to protect and nurture, to share warmth and comfort in a world that often seemed cold and unforgiving. Outside, the desert night was still, the stars twinkling above like distant fires. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly, casting gentle shadows on the walls. Two lonely souls sat together, finding in each other a small light in the darkness. One was a man hardened by loss, the other a young girl frightened by the world. Yet both were seeking the same thing: warmth, safety, and the quiet comfort of knowing they were not completely alone. As the hours passed, John realized that this night would mark the beginning of something important, something that neither of them could have predicted. It was not just a night of shelter and food, but a night that would sow the seeds of trust, understanding, and perhaps even healing. In the quiet of the ranch, with only the fire and the wind as witnesses, a fragile bond began to form between the lonely rancher and the frightened Apache girl who had asked for his warmth. And in that simple request, spoken with courage and hope, John felt a spark of something he had long thought lost: human connection, the reminder that even in the harshest of lives, kindness and compassion could still exist. The night stretched on, but neither of them minded the hours passing. They were no longer simply a man and a stranger. They were two souls beginning to recognize each other, finding solace in the warmth that had been denied them for too long. The next morning the sun rose slowly over the desert hills, casting a soft golden light across the ranch. John woke to the sound of birds chirping and the faint rustle of wind through the dry grass. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of calm as he moved through his cabin, preparing breakfast. The fire from the previous night had died down, leaving a warm, cozy glow that lingered in the room. Ayana, the young Apache girl, was still asleep on the chair near the stove, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. Her breathing was soft and steady, and John watched her for a few moments, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and concern. She had come to him frightened and alone, seeking warmth and safety, and now she slept peacefully, unaware of the quiet courage it had taken her to reach this place. He quietly moved about the cabin, not wanting to wake her yet. He filled a kettle with water, placed it over the fire, and began to prepare a simple breakfast of eggs and bread. As he worked, his mind wandered back to the night before. The fear in her eyes, the tremble in her small frame, and the way she had asked for warmth. Those few words had carried so much meaning, and they lingered in his mind like a gentle echo. When the smell of breakfast reached her, Ayanna stirred, opening her eyes slowly. She blinked against the morning light and then smiled weakly at him. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice still carrying a trace of sleep and uncertainty. "Morning, John," replied, offering her a warm cup of tea. "Eat something."
"You need your strength." She took the cup with both hands, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers.
She sipped it slowly, as if savoring not just the tea but the comfort of being cared for. John watched her, noticing how fragile she seemed, yet how determined she was to face each day despite her fears. As they ate, the silence between them was comfortable, filled with the quiet sounds of the cabin, the crackling fire, the soft clinking of utensils, and the distant call of a hawk. Neither of them spoke much, yet there was an unspoken understanding growing between them. But John realized that this girl, so young and alone, was not just a stranger in need. She was a mirror of his own loneliness, a reminder that he too had once needed someone to care for him. After breakfast, John helped Ayanna outside to the fresh morning air. The ranch was bathed in sunlight, the dry grass swaying gently in the breeze. The horses in the pasture watched them curiously as they approached, their ears flicking back and forth. John led Ayanna to the small stable, showing her the animals and explaining how he cared for them. "You've got a big responsibility," he said, gesturing to the horses. "They rely on you to feed them, to care for them, just like we rely on each other in life." Ayanna listened intently, her eyes wide with interest. "I've never had animals to care for," she admitted. "At home, I was always busy with chores, but never like this. Never like this with living creatures who trust you." John nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Caring for others, it teaches you patience. It teaches you kindness. And sometimes it teaches you about yourself. For a few hours they worked together, feeding the animals, mending a fence, and cleaning the barn. John showed her how to handle the horses gently, how to speak softly so they would listen, and how to move with care around the animals. Ayanna listened and learned quickly, her fear slowly being replaced by confidence. She laughed when a curious foal nuzzled her hand, and John couldn't help but smile at the sound. It was a pure, bright sound that made the ranch feel alive in a way it hadn't in years. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, they rested under the shade of a large mesquite tree. Ayanna finally spoke about herself, hesitantly at first. "My name is Ayanna," she said softly. I ran away from home. Things were not safe there. I didn't have anyone to help me."
"I was scared." John listened quietly, nodding as he understood.
He didn't ask for details, respecting her privacy, but he could see the fear in her eyes and the bravery it took to be here, alone, asking for help.
"You were very brave to come here," he said finally.
"Not many people could have done what you did, walking through the desert alone."
She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "I didn't know what else to do."
"I had nowhere else to go, and I remembered people sometimes help strangers. I hoped you would."
John felt a lump in his throat. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of someone who had faced danger and fear far beyond her years.
He understood then that her plea for warmth the night before was not just about the cold. It was about trust, safety, and hope. Hope, he repeated quietly. Psst. It's a powerful thing. And you held on to it, even when it was hard.
That's something to be proud of. For the rest of the afternoon, they shared stories of their lives.
Ayanna spoke about her family, the traditions of her people, and the struggles she had faced. Beth. She told John about the long walks she had taken, the nights sleeping under the stars, and the fear she had felt when she realized she was truly alone. John, in turn, shared memories of his own family, the happiness he had once known, and the pain he had endured. It was the first time in many years that John had spoken about his loss to anyone. He realized that speaking aloud brought a sense of relief, as if sharing the burden of grief made it lighter. Ayanna listened with empathy, her young heart understanding more than her years might suggest. She didn't judge him, didn't pity him. She simply listened, and in doing so offered him something he had long missed. Acceptance back. As the day turned to evening, the wind began to chill the air once more.
John led Ayanna back to the cabin, stoking the fire so that it would be warm when the night came.
He prepared another simple meal, and they ate together in silence, each lost in thought, yet comforted by the presence of the other. Later, as darkness fell, Ayanna curled up in the blanket near the fire, her small body relaxed and at ease. John sat across from her, staring into the flames, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in years, not just from the fire, but from the connection forming between them. He realized that she had not only found warmth and safety in his home, but that he had found something too, a reminder that caring for another person could heal the soul in ways nothing else could. The night stretched on, quiet except for the crackling of the fire. Outside, the desert was still, the stars shining brightly in the clear sky. Inside, two lonely hearts sat together, slowly learning to trust and care for one another. The world beyond the ranch might have been harsh and uncertain, but within these walls, a fragile sense of hope had taken root. As Ayanna drifted off to sleep, John thought about the days to come. He knew that challenges lay ahead. Questions would be asked. Decisions would need to be made. But he also knew that this moment, this shared trust and warmth, was something precious. It was a beginning. A chance for both of them to heal and find strength in the most unexpected of places. For the first time in years, John did not feel the crushing weight of loneliness pressing down on him. He had been reminded that life could surprise him, that connections could form in the most unlikely circumstances, and that even in a world full of uncertainty, kindness and courage could light the darkest nights. And as he watched Ayanna sleep peacefully by the fire, he silently vowed to protect her, to help her find safety and trust again. He had opened his door to a frightened stranger, and in doing so he had opened his heart to narration. The warmth she had sought that night had not only reached her, it had also returned to him, reminding him that even in solitude, human connection could bring life back to the coldest of hearts. The next few days passed quietly on the ranch, yet each one carried its own small rhythm and significance. John and Ayanna fell into a pattern, though neither called it that. Mornings were for chores, feeding the animals, checking fences, and making sure the ranch ran smoothly. Afternoons were quieter, spent under the shade of the mesquite tree or inside the cabin near the fire. And evenings were reserved for conversation, for sharing stories that neither had dared to speak aloud for many years. Ayanna was a quick learner. Within a few days, she had become familiar with the ranch and the animals. She could feed the chickens without spilling the corn, brush the horses with gentle, patient strokes, and even handle the stubborn old mule that had refused to obey anyone for years. Barash. John watched her with a mixture of pride and amazement. She had come to him scared and fragile, but now she was beginning to show strength and confidence, small pieces of herself that she had long hidden away. You've got a good hand with animals, John said one afternoon as Ayana carefully led a young foal back into the stall. They trust you because you listen to them, and they know you won't hurt them. Ayana smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face.
I never thought I'd be good at this, she said softly.
Back home, I never had animals. I never had the chance to learn things like this. Bah. It feels nice, though. John nodded.
He understood exactly what she meant. Life on the ranch was not easy.
It was hard work, long hours, and often lonely. But there was also a simplicity to it, a way of living that rewarded patience, care, and attention. It was a world where effort produced results, and kindness was noticed and returned. For both of them, it was a chance to find stability after months, or in John's case, years, of emotional turbulence. One afternoon, after finishing the morning chores, John suggested they sit outside under the tree to rest. The air was warm, and the gentle rustle of leaves offered a soothing soundtrack. "Tell me more about your people," John said quietly. "About your family, your traditions."
Ayana hesitated at first, unsure how much to reveal.
But as she looked at John, she saw patience in his eyes, a willingness to listen without judgment. Slowly, she began to speak, her words careful but earnest. "My people are Apache," she began. "We have lived in these lands for generations. We honor the earth, the animals, and the spirits of our ancestors. We believe in courage, respect, and protecting one another. But life at home hasn't always been kind. My uncle, he didn't care about those things. He cared only about control, about making me follow his rules, even when they hurt me." John listened, understanding the courage it had taken her to speak. "That must have been hard," he said softly. "Bah! To feel trapped like that, without anyone to turn to." Ayana nodded, looking down at her hands. "I didn't have anyone. I felt invisible. Sometimes. I thought no one would ever listen to me or care what I wanted. That's why I left. I had to try to find somewhere safe, somewhere someone might care." John felt a tightness in his chest. He understood completely. Yes. He had once felt the same, lost, invisible, left to face the world alone after the fire had taken everything. And now, sitting here with Ayana, he realized that perhaps fate had given them both a second chance. Ayana had found safety, and he had found a reason to care again, to open his heart despite years of solitude. For the next few hours they talked about their lives, their fears, and their hopes. Ayana shared small stories from her childhood, moments of happiness she had held on to despite the difficulties. She spoke of her favorite memories, the songs her mother used to sing, the smells of her grandmother's cooking, the simple games she played with her siblings. And John shared memories of his family, of quiet mornings in the garden, evenings around the fire, and the laughter that once filled his home. Through these stories, a bond began to grow between them. It was not just a bond of need or of safety, but a deeper connection that formed when two people allow themselves to be vulnerable. They began to understand each other's fears and joys, to recognize the strength it took to survive, and to appreciate the small acts of courage that made each day bearable. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, John noticed Ayana sitting quietly by the fire, staring at the flames. She seemed lost in thought, her small hands clasped around her knees. He sat beside her without speaking, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never had someone listen to me like this," she admitted. "Back home, people either ignored me or scolded me. I thought no one would ever care." John put a hand gently on her shoulder. "I care," he said simply. And I always will, as long as you need someone. You're not alone anymore. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope finally finding a place in her heart. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe enough to let down the walls she had built around herself, to trust another person fully. Days turned into a week, and the routine of life on the ranch continued. John and Ayanna grew more comfortable in each other's presence. They laughed together when a mischievous calf knocked over a bucket of water, and they shared quiet moments of reflection under the wide desert sky. Each day brought small victories, a fence repaired, a horse calmed, a story shared, a fear confronted. And each victory strengthened the bond between them, creating a sense of family where there had been none. Yet, even as their connection deepened, John knew that the world outside the ranch could not be ignored forever. Ayanna's family would notice her absence, and questions would be asked. Best, authorities might search for her, and she might be forced to return to a place where she did not feel safe. Bed. The thought of losing her filled him with a quiet dread. But for now, there was only this moment, the warmth of the fire, the gentle wind rustling through the trees, and the presence of a young girl who had found courage in the midst of fear. John realized that life had given him a rare gift, the chance to care for someone in need, to guide them, and to watch them grow stronger. But Ayanna had given him something equally precious: trust, companionship, and the reminder that human connection could heal wounds that time alone could not. One evening, as the sky turned deep purple and the first stars appeared, Ayanna spoke again. "John, I never thought I could feel safe anywhere," she said softly. "But here I feel like I belong, even if just for a little while."
John smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the fire.
"You do belong," he said firmly. "You belong here, with me, and with the animals. You have a place where you are welcome, where you are valued." She smiled back, a small, genuine smile that lit up her face. It was a smile that spoke of hope, trust, and the first flicker of healing. John knew that the road ahead would not be easy. Challenges would come, questions would be asked, and hard decisions would have to be made. But for this moment, they had each other, and that was enough. As the night deepened and the desert fell silent, John watched Ayanna drift off to sleep by the fire. He felt a quiet determination settle over him. He would protect her, guide her, and give her the safety she deserved. And in return, she was teaching him to open his heart once more, to embrace the warmth and connection that life could still offer. Outside, the stars twinkled endlessly in the clear desert sky, and the wind carried the soft sounds of night across the land. Inside, two souls, one old and weary, one young and scared, sat together in quiet companionship, finding in each other the strength and courage to face the world. And in that small cabin on the edge of the desert, a story of trust, care, and human connection continued to unfold. One day at a time, one small act of kindness at a time, shaping the lives of both the lonely rancher and the Apache girl who had asked for warmth and had found so much more.
Days passed peacefully on the ranch, but John knew the quiet could not last forever. Life outside the ranch would soon make its presence known.
Ayanna had found comfort and safety within the small cabin and the wide open land of the ranch, but beyond the hills people were noticing her absence. Her family, worried and desperate, had begun to search for her. John could sense it. He had been a part of the town for years, and he knew how quickly news could spread in a small community. It happened one afternoon when the sound of approaching footsteps reached the cabin. John was checking the fences along the eastern pasture when he saw a small group of people walking across the land. Beck. At first he assumed they were neighbors or travelers, but as they came closer he recognized the uniforms. Local authorities, along with a few townspeople he knew.
Ayanna, who had been feeding the horses, froze when she saw them.
Her eyes widened in fear and she clutched the feed bucket tightly. John quickly moved in front of her. placing himself as a barrier between her and the approaching group. "Mr. Miller!" one of the officers called as they came closer. "We're looking for a young girl named Ayanna." "Pass. We have reports that she might be here. Can we come inside?" John's heart tightened. He had anticipated this moment, but hoped it might be avoided for a little longer. He looked down at Ayanna, who was trembling slightly, her hands pressed to her chest. He knew she feared being taken back to a place where she felt unsafe, a place where her voice was not heard. "Why is she wanted?" John asked cautiously, trying to keep his voice calm. "Is she in trouble?" The officer hesitated, looking at him carefully. "She's a minor." Her family reported her missing. "We just need to ensure she is safe, and then decide the next steps." "We're not accusing her of anything. We just need to find her and bring her back." John nodded slowly, though his mind was racing. He faced a moral dilemma. If he allowed them to take Ayanna, she might return to a home where she felt threatened and unheard. Yet, if he refused, he could face serious consequences, even legal trouble. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on him. Ayanna looked up at him, her eyes filled with worry. "Bet." "John, I don't want to go back," she whispered. I can't go home yet." "Please." John felt a pang of sorrow, but he understood her fear completely. The thought of forcing her to return to a place where she did not feel safe was unbearable. But he also knew he had to consider the law and the consequences for both of them. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. I understand," he said softly. "But we have to be careful. We need to find a way to keep you safe, and also follow the right steps." The officer stepped closer, his expression neutral but firm. "Mr. Miller, we don't want trouble. We just need to make sure the girl is safe." "Can you help us?" John nodded. "I can help," he said slowly. "But we need to make sure she is taken somewhere safe, somewhere that can protect her and listen to her needs."
I don't want her sent back to a place where she feels unsafe. The officer considered this for a moment. We have contacts with local advocates who specialize in protecting children.
If you can bring her to them, she will be safe, and the situation will be handled properly. John felt a small sense of relief.
There was a solution that would protect Ayanna without breaking the law. He looked down at her, who was watching him with anxious eyes. "Psst. There's a place," he said gently, "where you will be safe. People there will listen to you, help you, and protect you." "They won't force you to do anything you don't want to do. We just have to go there." Ayanna nodded slowly, relief mixing with lingering fear. She trusted John, and that trust had been built over days of kindness, patience, and care. She knew he would not lead her into harm. Together they walked with the authorities and the advocate to a vehicle waiting on the dusty road. John kept a protective hand lightly on Ayanna's shoulder, offering silent reassurance. She clung to the blanket he had given her, a small piece of comfort in an uncertain moment. During the ride, Ayanna whispered questions about the process. John answered them as best as he could, keeping his tone calm and soothing. He explained that the advocates would listen to her story, understand her needs, and make sure she would not be forced into a situation she was afraid of. It was not a promise of a perfect life, but it was a promise of safety and respect, something she had rarely experienced before. Arriving at the Advocate Center, John and Ayana were greeted by a kind woman who introduced herself and explained how they would work together to ensure Ayana's protection. John could see the cautious hope in Ayana's eyes, the first flicker of trust in a world that had often been cruel to her.
I will stay here with you until you are safe, John said softly.
I will make sure no one forces you to do anything you don't want. Ayana looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you, John, she whispered. I don't know what I would have done without you. He smiled gently. You were brave enough to come here. That's why you're safe now. I just helped guide you a little. For John, it was a bittersweet moment. He was proud of her courage, yet he felt the ache of separation. They had grown close over the past days, sharing meals, chores, and stories.
He had begun to feel a deep connection, and now he would have to step back, trusting that the people at the center would care for her as he had.
Over the next few hours, John helped the advocates gather Ayana's belongings, explaining her routines, the animals she had cared for, and the things that comforted her. The advocates listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. John could see the relief on Ayana's face as she realized she would be heard, that her experiences and fears mattered to someone outside her small world. When it was finally time to leave, John knelt beside her, holding her hands gently. You are strong, he said. You've come this far, and you will continue to be strong. Remember that. And remember, you are never alone.
Desperation. You have people who care about you. Ayana nodded, hugging him briefly.
I will never forget you, she said. You gave me safety and warmth when I had nowhere else.
John felt a lump in his throat.
And you reminded me what it feels like to care for someone again, he whispered. Take care of yourself, Ayana. Be brave and trust that life can be kind again. As she walked into the building with the advocate, John watched from a distance, feeling a mixture of sadness, pride, and hope. He knew challenges would still come, but for now she was safe, and that was enough. He had faced his moral dilemma, choosing compassion and protection over fear and self-interest, and in doing so he had made a difference in a life that truly needed it. The sun was beginning to set when John finally returned to his ranch. The wind was cooler now, rustling the grass with a soft, comforting sound. He walked slowly through the fields, checking the fences and watching the animals settle for the evening. The world felt quieter, yet somehow fuller, enriched by the experience he had just shared.
That night, as he sat by the fire, John thought about Ayana. He hoped she would find the courage to heal, to trust again, and to grow into the strong, confident person he knew she could be.
Then he realized something important. Life would always bring challenges, but it was the choices made in those moments, choices of kindness, courage, and compassion, that defined a person. For the first time in years, John felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced a difficult choice, one that could have gone many different ways, and he had chosen what he believed was right. Ayana's safety, trust, and future were in better hands now, and he had played a role in giving her that chance. Outside, the desert night was calm, and the stars twinkled silently above. Inside the cabin, John sat quietly by the fire, reflecting on the events of the day. The moral challenge had been real, but he had met it with care and courage. And in doing so, he had not only helped Ayana, but he had also discovered something within himself, something he had thought lost forever. The ability to care deeply, to act with empathy, and to offer warmth to someone in need, even when it required personal sacrifice. And so, life on the ranch continued, carrying with it the quiet promise of hope, the strength of compassion, and the enduring lesson that even in the most difficult situations, choosing kindness and protection could change lives forever. The weeks that followed Ayana's placement at the safe center were quiet, but John's thoughts often drifted to her. He wondered how she was adjusting, whether she felt secure, and if she remembered the small lessons they had shared on the ranch. Even though they were apart, the bond they had formed remained strong, etched deeply in both their hearts. The memories of her laughter, the gentle hum of her voice, and the way she had cared for the animals stayed with John, a reminder that life could still offer connection and warmth. One bright morning, John received a letter at his cabin. The handwriting was small, neat, and unmistakably Ayana's. He opened it carefully, feeling a mix of curiosity and hope. The letter was simple, yet it carried a depth of emotion he could feel with every line. She wrote about the center, how she was adjusting and how kind the people there were. Bess. She spoke of the safety she now felt and how she was learning to trust again. And most importantly, she wrote about John, how grateful she was for his care, patience, and the warmth he had given her when she had nothing else. John read the letter slowly, savoring each word. A smile spread across his face, and for the first time in a long time, his heart felt light. He realized that even though she was far away, the bond they had formed could never be broken. She had found safety, and he had found a purpose renewed. The simple joy of helping someone in need and witnessing the growth and healing that followed. A few days later, John received a phone call from the center. The advocate explained that Ayana had been asking about the ranch, about him, and about the animals. She wanted to visit, to see the place where she had first felt safe and cared for. John's heart leapt with both excitement and nervousness. He knew that allowing her to return, even for a short visit, would bring joy. But it also meant facing the bittersweet reality that she was no longer his responsibility in the same way. When the day arrived, John prepared the ranch carefully, but he made sure the animals were fed and the fences secure. The cabin was clean, the fire ready to be lit, and the blankets fresh and warm. He wanted everything to be perfect for Ayana's visit, a place where she could feel the same safety and comfort she had found the first night she arrived. When she finally arrived, the look on her face said everything John needed to know. Her eyes were bright with excitement and relief, and her small smile radiated a happiness that warmed John's heart. She ran toward him and embraced him gently, a hug filled with gratitude, trust, and a deep sense of connection. "I missed this place," Ayana said softly, pulling back to look around. "I missed you, and I wanted to see it all again." John nodded, feeling a lump in his throat.
I'm glad you came, he said quietly. It's not the same without you here every day, but it's good to see you happy and safe.
They spent the day together as they had in the past, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and walking through the fields. Ayana laughed when the mischievous foal tried to nibble her sleeve, and John chuckled at her surprised expression. The bond they had formed over weeks of care and trust was still strong, a gentle reminder that meaningful connections could survive distance and hardship. As the sun began to set, they sat under the mesquite tree, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. Ayana leaned against John slightly, her small hand resting on his arm. "John, I've learned so much since I left," she said. "I've learned to trust, to be brave, and to believe that people can care about you. But I'll never forget the first place where I felt safe."
"I'll never forget you." John smiled, feeling the warmth of her words seep into his heart.
"And I'll never forget you," he replied. "You reminded me what it feels like to care for someone, to share warmth and kindness. You taught me that, even in loneliness, connection is possible." The evening stretched on, filled with stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. They talked about Ayana's experiences at the center, the lessons she had learned, and the dreams she now held for her future. John shared his thoughts as well, speaking about the ranch, the animals, and the joy he felt in seeing her grow stronger and more confident. As darkness fell and the stars began to shine, Ayanna prepared to leave. She hugged John tightly once more, a lingering embrace that spoke of love, trust, and gratitude. Despair.
"I'll come back," she promised softly.
"I'll visit whenever I can, and I'll carry what you've given me. Your warmth, your kindness, and your care. Always." John watched her leave, feeling a mixture of sadness and joy. Though she would not stay with him permanently, he knew that the lessons they had shared and the bond they had formed would last a lifetime. She was safe, happy, and growing stronger each day, and that knowledge filled him with peace. In the weeks that followed, Ayanna visited occasionally, each visit a reminder of the connection they shared. She would help with the animals, share stories of her experiences, and laugh freely in the open spaces of the ranch. John felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet joy that came from knowing that he had made a difference in someone's life.
He also noticed changes within himself.
The loneliness that had once weighed heavily on his heart had softened. He felt lighter, more open to the world, and more willing to embrace connection. Through caring for Ayanna, he had discovered a strength and compassion he thought he had lost. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a place of shared warmth, laughter, and hope. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the stars began to twinkle, John sat by the fire with Ayanna nearby. They were silent for a moment, simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. Beth. Finally, Ayanna spoke. "John, I've learned something important," she said softly. "No matter where life takes me, I'll always remember that people can care, that kindness exists, and that even when you feel alone, you can find someone who understands you." John nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "And I've learned the same," he said. "You reminded me that life can still bring connection and warmth, even after great loss. You showed me that caring for someone else can heal your own heart as much as theirs." The wind rustled softly through the trees, carrying the scent of sage and desert flowers. The animals settled quietly, and the fire crackled gently in the cabin. In that peaceful moment, John realized that life, with all its challenges and uncertainties, had a way of offering hope even in the darkest times. He had opened his heart, offered warmth, and in doing so had changed both his life and Ayanna's forever. As night settled over the ranch, John looked up at the stars and felt a quiet gratitude. He had found connection, purpose, and hope. Ayanna had found safety, trust, and a place where she belonged. And together they had created something enduring, a bond that distance, time, and circumstance could not break. In the days, months, and years that followed, John and Ayanna continued to visit, each meeting a reminder of what they had shared. The ranch remained a place of care, warmth, and safety, and the lessons they had learned together stayed with them both. John knew that the world would continue to bring challenges, but he also knew that kindness, courage, and compassion could light even the darkest nights. And in the quiet of the desert under the endless sky, two lives, one once lonely, one once afraid, had intertwined in a story of trust, healing, and hope. They had discovered that warmth, both physical and emotional, could change lives, and that even in a world that sometimes seemed harsh, human connection could bring light, comfort, and a future filled with possibility.